Your Excellency, Ambassador Ian Lindsay, thank you for joining us on this interview today.
Thank you, George. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here and to having the chance to have a chat with you.
Can you give us a brief overview on your career to date and how you ended up back in Bahrain after a sojourn here as the British Ambassador?
Yeah. Well, I was a British diplomat for 40 years, and I came here in 2011 from Hong Kong, where I'd been the number two in the British consulate in Hong Kong, and also running our trade and investment operation in Hong Kong, plus some Asia Pacific work as well. And I was here for 4 very happy years, 2011 to 2015. I arrived at it was a challenging time for Bahrain, and my task, working with the leadership of Bahrain and Bahrainis, was to take the relationship between Bahrain and the UK, long-standing, very close relationship, to take it back up to where it had been. And I left here, I think, feeling that I had done a good job in collaboration with our friends here. I always say it takes two to tango. And then I left here and spent 8 or 9 months learning Hungarian every day. And that was a bit of brain training. And I was British ambassador in Hungary for 4.5 years, leaving in September 2020. And of course, the last 6 months of my time in Budapest was COVID. A difficult time, and not least my deputy at the embassy was one of the first people to die of COVID in Hungary. So absolutely tragic. I was back in the UK for about 3 or 4 months, and then I returned to Bahrain to take up my current role as an advisor to the chairman of the EDB, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, the Prime Minister. I took that role up in January 2021, and I've been here ever since. And it's great to be back in Bahrain. Bridget and I had many friends here, and many of them still here when we arrived back. And we were fortunate enough to be invited back here for a weekend in 2019, and we met up with many of our friends then. So we never lost touch with Bahrain. Bahrain was never far away, and we were fortunate enough to be invited by His Majesty to the Royal Windsor Horse Show, even when we were in Budapest. So we never lost touch with Bahrain, and it's been wonderful to be back here. Absolutely loving being back in Bahrain. Well, it's over 3 years now, and loving the job.
Fantastic. What motivated you to transition towards your current advisory economic role in Bahrain after such a distinguished diplomatic career internationally?
Well, I've done 40 years as a British diplomat. As they say, people get less for murder. So having been overseas really from 2003 until 2020, I could have stayed in the Foreign Office, but I would have had to have gone back to work in London. And frankly, didn't really want to do that. I was attracted by the offer of coming back here to work in essentially promoting investment into Bahrain, promoting Bahrain, a place which I love and is very much, a home, and a place which, when we left in 2015, very special. I mean, we had gone through a difficult time with Bahrain, but we'd come out the other end of it with a relationship between the UK and Bahrain that was in very good state. We had, I think, helped with the reforms which the leadership wanted to implement here post 2011. So I was very happy to come back here, and having, as I explained, I came here in 2011 from Hong Kong, where I was doing a trade and investment role of promoting British exports overseas into East Asia, and promoting foreign direct investment into the UK. I was very happy to the prospect of coming here and essentially that role of promoting investment into Bahrain, in and through Bahrain. So a lot of people say, oh, it must be wonderful traveling again. And I say to people, actually, when I was a British diplomat, as a British ambassador, when I was a British ambassador in Bahrain, my field of vision was 75 kilometers by 25 kilometers. All I was dealing with was with Bahrain. And the same in Hungary. All I dealt with was with Hungary. I didn't do international traveling, except maybe to an occasional regional conference. Whereas now, I'm traveling pretty regularly. This year so far in Switzerland for Davos, in Hungary for bilateral talks. I'm going to Hong Kong tomorrow to represent Bahrain at an HSBC investment conference. And during the next few months, trips to Saudi Arabia, Germany, the US, France, Ireland, in wearing my EDB hat. And I love doing that. I love promoting Bahrain. I love hearing people say, I never knew that about Bahrain. So I really love doing this job.
Fantastic. Can you highlight some key economic development initiatives that you've been involved with since joining the Economic Development Board here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there have been specific investment projects that have taken place over the 3 years I've been here. I've been involved in some of the projects, particularly obviously with countries with which I'm familiar. So I spent 8 years living in Japan. I still speak some Japanese. I led an EDB mission to Japan 2 years ago, and then was part of the ministerial delegation to Japan last May. Similarly, I've had a lot of focus on India. I was covering India from London for 4 years, back about 20 years ago. And I've been very keen for us to do more with India. It's on our doorstep. So a lot of, if you like, geographical initiatives, particularly re-engaging after COVID. You know, COVID, although we came out of COVID quite quickly here in Bahrain, the reality was that for much of 2021, we weren't able to travel because other parts of the world were still not open.
Sure.
When I landed in Tokyo for our first mission to Japan for several years, it was a few days after Japan had lifted its quarantine requirements. So a lot of the initiatives have been in relation to re-engaging with East Asia, re-engaging with India, doing more in Western Europe. The UK, obviously I work in the UK during the summer, but that relationship is in such a good state, so many people involved in it. I think I add a little bit more value with some of the relationships of parts of Europe that I know. Also, one of the things I've been involved in is we talk a lot about Team Bahrain and the fact that, and it should be the case, on this small island with a comparatively small population, being more joined up internationally. So I've been working very closely with the Foreign Ministry on making sure that our ambassadors, Bahraini ambassadors and their teams have got all the information that they need to go out and bat for Bahrain, particularly if they don't have an EDB representative in their embassy. We're represented in around about 12 countries where the EDB has got a representative, a full-time representative. But in other countries where we don't have someone, making sure that our embassies, our ambassadors know what the key information to be passing to the business people they meet, to the government representatives they meet, to enable them to promoting Bahrain.
Right.
And obviously I do a lot of other things as well on behalf of the leadership out with the sort of EDB role, and particularly obviously making sure that international visitors here are looked after. And we have a number of visitors here from countries with which I'm very familiar and still speak the language, and that's been good. It was a particular highlight was when the last president of Hungary was invited here by His Majesty just over a year ago, and I knew the president from my time in Hungary, and it was wonderful to be essentially chaperoning her around Bahrain, and it's also particularly nice when you have visitors here who don't know Bahrain and just fall in love with the place, as she did, and as many of the other international visitors, VIP visitors we've had, have really loved the place and loved what Bahrain is about and the people. And that's, I suppose, for all of us, we recognize that the thing that makes Bahrain stand out in this whole region, in the whole of the Middle East, are Bahrainis.
Absolutely, it's the character of the people that's...
Yeah, it's the unique selling point, if you like, to use one of the things I get involved in, promoting Bahrain.
Absolutely. What do you see as being the biggest challenges facing Bahrain's economy currently, and how do you propose that these will be faced and overcome?
Well, I suppose that we're part of the GCC. We're part of a network of countries that are doing incredibly well. We're doing well ourselves. We've just seen in the news that our economy will be growing faster this year than it did last year. I see one of the challenges we have is to make ourselves heard. I go to international events and I see some of our neighbours with their names headlined over buildings or having a lot of publicity. And that's not who we are. We're much more about the people-to-people relationship. We don't have zillions to spend, unlike some of our neighbours, so we have to spend wisely. And the best thing I think we can do is actually getting our message out to people and getting people to visit Bahrain. So maybe one of the challenges we face is getting people to come to Bahrain, because once they come here and they see the place and they see Bahrainis, it makes a huge difference. That's why the F1 is a godsend from the perspective of the foreign direct investment.
Absolutely.
We bring people in here. Some are existing investors. Others are people we want to get to come here. And the impact that Bahrain makes on them is really very impressive. So making ourselves heard. An ambassador who shall not be named here said to me, everybody in Bahrain knows where my country is. Nobody in my country knows where Bahrain is. It is something that we're making our voice heard, being visible, which is why I take my role of being out there representing Bahrain at times internationally, being part of missions. I take that really seriously because it's an opportunity for us to make ourselves heard, not in competition with anyone else. And we always make the point that with our neighbours, particularly also the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we're not in competition. It's very much a complementary relationship. It has to be.
Symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. So, I think I see that as the challenge. Obviously, as we see in the newspapers a lot here, people wanting to ensure that young Bahrainis have got good jobs that require, modern 21st century skills, that they've got the education and the skills to do that. So talent management is incredibly important. And that's why we work very closely here with Tamkeen to ensure that the Bahrainis are the employees of choice for investors when they're coming in here. That'll be a continuing, ongoing challenge. We're putting a lot of effort into that. And I can tell you, working here at the EDB, wonderful bunch of people, the most talented group of people I've ever worked with. And going back to my point of working in the British Foreign Office for 40 years, British Foreign Office is regarded as one of the world's great diplomatic services. I worked with some superb people. I can say hand on heart that I have never worked with such a highly talented group of people as I work with here at the EDB. Skilled, educated, talented, motivated, full of ideas, full of innovation, and wanting to do their best for Bahrain. It's an absolute joy working here with them. It does make me feel very old, though.
Talk about don't we all feel that way?
Well, I think you must feel particularly old. But no, it's an absolute joy, and I think this is they represent the very best of Bahrain, and that's why it's a privilege to work with them.
So, how do you perceive the role of foreign direct investment in Bahrain's economic growth? And also, what strategies are being implemented to attract and retain these investors?
Yeah. Well, in terms of, it's absolutely critical. And there's one particular statistic which I think shows how important it is for Bahrain. Foreign direct investment represents around about 85% of Bahrain's GDP. It's equivalent to 85% of Bahrain's GDP. That compares with a global average of just between 40 and 45%, so double the global average. And in the GCC, it's around about 35%. So FDI, foreign direct investment, is disproportionately important here.
That's right.
It's very important that we attract new investment as well as retaining existing investment. The reality is, over the last 3 years here, I can't think of a single investor who is disinvested. Around about 1/3 of the investment last year was a record year for us. We brought in nearly $1.8 billion worth of foreign direct investment into Bahrain, and that's investments that will take place over the next 3 years, creating over 5,000 jobs over the next 3 years. That was a record year for us. So 1/3 of that was actually existing investors reinvesting, expanding, and that's great news. So it is incredibly important for our economy. It creates jobs, it creates prosperity, it helps to grow the kingdom. And I think there's a historical statistic which I think is really important, and I think it shows how important foreign direct investment is. The EDB was set up by His Royal Highness in 2002 to diversify Bahrain's economy away from oil and gas. So oil and gas represented around about 42% of a $10 billion economy in 2002. Roll on 20 years, oil and gas represents now 16% of a $44 billion economy.
Wow.
And in the meantime, we've expanded in other areas. So, for example, financial services is now our largest sector, just ahead of oil and gas. You've got manufacturing coming up behind, you've got logistics, you've got tourism. So, but the job is not yet done. We could continue to diversify, and we focus on sectors such as financial services, manufacturing, logistics, ICT, tourism. Those are all our priority sectors, and they fit in with the government's 2030 strategy. So it's we focus. We're not scattergun. We are very focused on the sectors that we want to bring investment into. Obviously, there are other sectors as well, like education and healthcare, where we also bring in investment. But we have got our priorities. We've got our priority markets in Asia, for example, Japan, Korea, China, India, Singapore. Obviously, in the region, the majority of investment into Bahrain continues to come from our neighbours.
Sure.
And we see that ourselves,
course, yeah.
for example, with Marassi, investment from Eagle Hills, from the UAE. And then obviously in the United States is very important. In Europe, you're looking at the UK, France, Germany, and Italy. So we have our priority markets, our priority sectors, and a team here that is, sniper focused in terms of the companies that we want to try to bring in. So we have our target list of companies that we want to bring in, and we're looking at investments of scale, people who will bring in a good number of jobs, skilled jobs, talented jobs, so that we can. And I think there's no doubt in terms of in this region, I think we can say hand on heart that the Bahrainis are the most talented Gulf Arabs. We get that feedback from companies who have got operations here and elsewhere. And of course, you only have to scratch a bank in Dubai and you find Bahrainis, because of course Bahrain has been a production line of bankers and financiers for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
We got our targets, bring in the investments, bring in the jobs, and we're at that, day and night. And when I say day and night, I'm not joking. I'll leave here, let's say at 6 o'clock in the evening, and there will be the teams on video calls with the US. Hopefully not video calls in Japan at that time, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning there. But you know what I mean. It is virtually like a 24/7 operation here, because we're talking with companies from Tokyo the whole way over to California.
Given your experience in diplomatic and economic roles internationally, how do you balance political considerations with economic objectives in your role as an advisor here?
We're very much focused our economic objectives, if you like, in terms of attracting investment, take account of our political considerations. That's part and parcel of our work. But we are guided by the leadership as to where they want us to focus on. So to some extent, that is built in to our objectives. We obviously get to a very clear steer from His Royal Highness, from the board, which obviously covers government ministers as well as private sector representatives, as to what they want us to focus on. We've got and it's also, of course, a factor for, we mustn't forget, it's also a factor for the companies coming in here. And, one of the things that I make clear to them is, the GCC, 6 countries, so you've got 15 bilateral relationships. 2 of the closest relationships among those 15 are Bahrain and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Sure.
Bahrain and the UAE. And you can add to that Bahrain and Kuwait as well, Bahrain and Oman. So we have got very close relationships with our near neighbours who continue to provide the majority of foreign direct investment into Bahrain. So but we're very much, our main focus is on what companies have got to offer us. And as I said, it's not just investing in Bahrain. Very, very few investors invest in Bahrain purely for the Bahraini market. They're investing in Bahrain because we're a gateway to the Gulf, not least a gateway to Saudi Arabia. One of the things we also say to people is, we're located at the heart of the Gulf. We've got the best route into Saudi Arabia of any of our neighbours. And we are, if you like, the happy consensus, the happy compromise. People don't bat an eyelid if they said, we're set up in Bahrain. And of course, the thing I love about, is it a political consideration? No, it's not. It's more about people consideration. The number of times internationally I meet people and we say that we're from Bahrain, and they smile. And they say, I worked in Bahrain, or I had a family relative who worked in Bahrain, or is working in Bahrain. We've met Bahrainis. It's fantastic to see the way that Bahrain brings a smile to people's faces. As there's a natural warmth, as we all know, here. So I think there's a consideration. I really do hope at times for our investors that there's a consideration actually that Bahrain is actually a really nice place to set up shop in. Bahrainis are really nice people. Said on a few occasions as a sort of a mocktail here. We make people feel welcome.
Yeah.
We make people feel at home. And the third thing we do that very few countries do globally, we make people feel part of the family. Hence, we have a lot of expats who never leave. I'm looking at one now. But many, many people here. When I was ambassador here, obviously had a lot of engagement with the British community. Brits who arrived here in the 60s or the 70s. Brits who were born here to expat parents who were here, who'd arrived here in the 50s or the 40s. And you remember there was one lady I met who was born here. She passed away now, unfortunately. Born here in the American Mission Hospital in the late 1920s. That depth of connection is unique to Bahrain. And it reflects the fact that I think Bahrain still has a very special feel to it. We're not ersatz, we're real. I hope that that is a factor that people do take account of when they're considering investing in the region. One of the reasons, if you like, the intangible reasons as to why you want to invest in Bahrain, as well as all the other very good reasons for doing so.
Expanding on that fact, what sectors of Bahrain's economy do you consider hold the most potential for growth and investment, and why?
I think one of the areas is on the tech side. ICT is very important, but it's beyond that. We're talking fintech as well. These are the new industries. There's tech in everything, and we're very keen to get more fintech in here. We're keen to get people bringing tech hubs in here. We're talking this morning with an ambassador from one country about an engineering tech hub here for one of the companies from his country. And really that plays to two things. Industries of the future. So in other words, not something that's going to be out of fashion in a couple of years' time, but also where Bahrainis have got the talent and will continue to have the talent. And you're thinking, for example, of the fact that, half of all students at Bahrain University, the Polytechnic, the other universities, are doing STEM subjects. If you're doing STEM, you can easily, if you're not going to be looking to go into tech in any case, you have got the skills that could take you into tech. For us, I think one of the Amazon Web Services was a turning point with the hyper data center here, the first in the whole of the Middle East. And that opened up a whole host of other people to come and look here. But certainly during my time here, one of the key investment successes was Citibank setting up a tech hub here. Now, Citibank already had tech hubs all around the world, but they needed a new one to cope with the quantity of business they needed to do. None of their existing hubs could take on the existing business, so they're looking for a new place. We were in competition with Ireland, Israel, India, Singapore, all gold standard reputation in terms of tech. We won because our coders were as good as coders anywhere else, but also an advantage. We were cheaper than anywhere else. And we were willing to go the extra mile to bring Citibank in. And there's been a huge success for Citibank. That's 1,000 jobs over 10 years, which in other countries may not seem a lot. In a country of 750,000 Bahrainis, 1,000 jobs is actually a lot. It would equate, for example, in the UK to someone saying, I'm going to create 50,000 jobs over 10 years. That was really a turning point for us. And there are other companies in the pipeline coming in to set up with similar operations. We've got some of the consultancy firms have already set up similar operations. So I think tech and more tech sets us apart. Tourism as well, because I think we still have got a lot more to offer on tourism. We've had some great successes over the last few years. What we've seen at Marassi, for example, with the Address, Vida opening up, the Jumeirah Hotel, other hotels opening up here. There's more than we can do here. I particularly believe that we should be attracting a lot more Indian tourists here, because I think we are a very attractive alternative to Dubai, which is where India's overseas city.
Absolutely.
So tourism, tech, other areas as well, but those are the ones I think that offer a lot.
As a business destination, how does Bahrain differentiate itself compared to other GCC states?
I think talent is one key area, a lot of local talent. And that's important for many companies now, particularly looking, if they're using Bahrain as a base for the rest of the Gulf, having local talent is really important. I think the second aspect is cost. We use KPMG to run the figures every couple of years, and across most sectors we are significantly cheaper than than other centres in the Gulf. And partnership, and this goes back to Team Bahrain, that inevitably, as we're a small island with a small group of people at the top and in decision making, that we always say you're only sort of one phone call away from speaking to the people at the very top of the tree. And so you would end up building personal relationships with Bahrainis, and that of course is incredibly, we both know this, that in certain other cities in the Gulf, there's a glass ceiling. Mm-hmm. It's foreign business, local, oil and water never mix. And if I may say so, there are certain institutions here in Bahrain which I think reflect the fact that this is a very different place. The Bahrain Rugby Club is a place where you meet, it's not just an expat place, you have Bahrainis, expats from all walks of life mixing together. But we also know this, we hear from our friends who move here from other parts of the Gulf. They say, in my first month, I was invited out to lunch, I was invited around to someone's house for dinner, etc., etc. Bahrainis build up friendships with incomers very quickly. And so I think that's incredibly important. It's the people point again, isn't it? We make people feel welcome. We make them feel at home. We make them feel part of the family. Obviously, in addition to those, essentially the three, people, profit, and partnership, in addition to that, logistically, we're in a superb location at the heart of the Gulf. We've got the best route into Saudi Arabia of any of the countries along the Arabian Gulf. And obviously, we have a very strong, maybe the closest connection between 82 countries in the Gulf probably is us and Saudi Arabia, with us and the UAE maybe also very close. Sure. As well. So very close friendships with our neighbours. Mm. That's, I think, a very impressive package to offer people, as well as the fact, obviously, we have been a financial services centre since the mid-70s. We're obviously, in terms of other places in the Gulf, maybe are global financial centres, but we're a very strong regional centre. Mm. So we have got clear strengths that help to differentiate us from our neighbours, from our partners.
Actually, the next question you've already answered, which is what are the most significant opportunities and challenges posed by Bahrain's geographic location, but that's fair enough. Okay, as an advisor, how do you envisage Bahrain's economic landscape evolving over the next decade, and what are the key strategies in place to achieve this vision?
To some extent, we've covered this ground already, but I think increased diversification, clearly. We have to do that. Obviously, on energy, we'll be looking at more renewables, clearly, but we need to continue to diversify the economy, and that will happen. That is happening. I think the continued development of Bahraini talent will make Bahrain an attractive destination in the years to come. So we're preparing the ground now in education. I think it's clear now that there's a much closer connection between what universities will be producing, and tertiary education will be producing, and what the Bahraini economy requires. We need more people who are able to go into the jobs that are there and the jobs that Bahrain needs for the future. Much fewer generalists and people who are more coming out with qualifications and skills that are fit for purpose for, let's say, 2030, 2040 Bahrain.
What about vocational training?
Absolutely. Absolute must. More focus on that as well. It is the case that not every student needs to go to university. Not every student is qualified in terms of mentally or in the zone for a tertiary education of that nature. So vocational training, more fit for purpose tertiary education. I think also in terms of the diversification, we will continue to attract a large amount of our investment from the neighbours. But we need to diversify further amongst the non-neighbours. Having spent 12 years of my career in the Far East, 8 in Tokyo, 4 in Hong Kong, and I've always believed that the future is very Asian, that I'm really keen to see. I was delighted last year to see that we had ministerial-led visits by Abdullah Fakhro, the Minister for Industry and Commerce, to India, Japan, Korea, China. And we need to bring in more investment from there. Obviously, Europe will continue to be important. So will the States. But I think there's a lot more we can do in Asia, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to Hong Kong tomorrow. Continued diversification of the economic sectors, diversification of the geographical range that we'll be getting from, and continuing to invest in Bahraini talent.
Finally, when you're not traveling around the world selling Bahrain, how do you relax? Do you have any specific hobbies that you and your wife Bridget enjoy together in Bahrain?
The dog. The dog. The dog. The world, our life revolves around the dog.
Okay.
I mean, obviously lots of friends here. Bahrain's a great place to socialize. But the dog is, now that our son is 32 years old, working in London, our child is the dog. And that's playing golf with my pals. We play the Calcutta Cup match, the Scots against the English, once a month. I think the Scots are still winning.
Okay.
But obviously, and clearly, getting a few breaks away from here. This is a small island, and getting off from time to time down to first visit to Goa a few months ago, and nice to get a chance to sort of have a bit of a break away from here. And then obviously we spend the summer in London. It's nice to be there, seeing family and friends in London, promoting Bahrain in the UK, which is great fun, and I really enjoy that. And working from the Bahraini embassy in London is an absolute joy. It is very much a case of, I'm British, but like so many British people here, I work in Bahrain and I work for Bahrain. Obviously, in my case, working for the government and the leadership, and it's an absolute joy to be back here. It's an absolute privilege to be working here, I love it. I should be buying lottery tickets most days.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
George, great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Very good.
Thank you.